Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Retro Muscle. In today's video, we're going to continue our coverage of the 1980 Grand Prix circuit and move on to the second scheduled show, the Louisiana Grand Prix. But before we do, let's get everyone back up to speed on the overall Grand Prix score heading into this competition. Now, while I was researching for this show, I actually came across an awesome article written by the late great Bob Gruskin. And as you can see right here, attached to the article were the final placings and points earned by the competitors at the Florida Grand Prix. Alright, now let's move on to the Louisiana Grand Prix. This show took place on March 15th at the Lafayette Municipal Auditorium. The competition was organized by local promoter Bob Summer, who was known for co-authoring Boyer Coe's bodybuilding manual, Getting Strong, Looking Strong. Physique Productions also helped with promotion, along with Grand Prix sponsors Da Vinci Labs, who also kicked in $5,000 in prize money. Okay, before we move on and list our competitors, I'm going to quickly run down the list of judges for this competition. First, we had Mike Graham, a national-level judge for the AAU. Next, we had Hank Breaker, a gym owner from Houston, Texas. Our third judge was Kenny Guess, who was a former Mr. Louisiana. Next, we had Arlie Vest, who was a well-known Southern Regional judge for the AAU. Our fifth judge was former AAU Mr. America Lloyd Red Lerrell. Red was actually very well known in the area and owned a health and racket club in Lafayette. The gym takes up 7 acres of land and is still operating to this day, which is pretty cool. Okay, our next judge was the ripped Clarence Bass, who was the current AAU National Physique Committee vice president. And finally, we had returning Grand Prix head judge Bill Pearl. Okay, now let's move on to our 11 competitors that were invited out. And actually, our first 2 competitors were Louisiana natives. First, we had Boyer Coe of Lake Charles, but I do believe he spent some time living in the area of Lafayette while he was attending college at Southwestern Louisiana. The next competitor was Casey Viator, who was currently living in California but was originally from New Iberia, Louisiana. All right, moving on to competitor number 3, we had Steve Mihalik, followed by Carlos Rodriguez and Ed Corney. Our sixth competitor who was invited out was the Lion of Lebanon, Samir Bannout. Competitor number 7 was Annabelle Lopez. Competitor number 8 was Chris Dickerson, who was currently in the lead of the overall Grand Prix standings, with a total of 16 points earned from his win in Miami. Our ninth competitor was actually one of 2 last-minute entrants, and that was Robbie Robinson. According to Bill Reynolds, after Robinson's last show in November, where he competed at the Canada Cup, Robbie was going to take off some time from competition. So he had left the West Coast and moved out east to New York City for a little bit. But he cut things short and ended up taking a flight from New York to Louisiana at the last second. Okay, on to our 10th competitor, and that was the Golden Eagle, Tom Platz. And our final competitor was former NABA Mr. Universe, Tony Emmett. Okay, now that we've listed everybody off, let's move on to pre-judging. The first round of judging had the competitors in relaxed facing poses, with Dickerson and Viator both scoring 100 points each, followed by Robbie Robinson and Samir Bannout tying with 98 points. But one thing I'd like to note is that although Dickerson and Viator received perfect scores, one judge actually gave Dickerson a score of 19, whereas Viator got 20s across the board. Now, since both the lowest and highest scores are dropped, this didn't really affect Dickerson, but I thought it was worth pointing out. When I originally saw the score, I assumed it was a local judge that was favoring Casey, but actually, when you look closer, judge number 7 turned out to be Bill Pearl. So, anyway, on to round 2, compulsory poses. This round was a repeat, with Dickerson and Viator scoring a perfect 100 points each. However, Samir Bannout was able to edge out Robinson by 1 point, and according to Steve Robinson's article in Iron Man magazine, while Samir and Robbie were being compared by judges, both competitors went into a mini pose down with each other, and actually it forced Wayne D'Amelia to take the mic and warn both competitors that they could lose points for this action. So that could have been the reason for the 1 point difference here, but I can't be certain. Anyway, after the second round of judging was over, the competitors and officials had time to rest up before the night show. And thanks to Grand Prix judge Red Lerrell, him along with his wife had opened up their home and kitchen to the competitors and staff helping with the competition. Along with their southern hospitality, Johnny Hines, a former rodeo champion turned oil tycoon, owned a souped-up motorhome that was valued at $150,000, and he drove the competitors and officials everywhere they needed to go that weekend. All right, moving on to our main event. The night show began at 7 p.m., starting with round 3, individual posing routines. In this round, Dickerson, Robinson, and Samir all scored 100 points each, while Casey only earned 99. According to Bill Reynolds, this probably happened since competitors were being evaluated alone. So when Casey is being compared to another competitor, his strong points really stand out, especially his mass. He pretty much overwhelms the competition. But when he's standing up there alone, it makes it a little bit easier for the judges to point out his flaws. Okay, and now on to the final round, the most crucial one, the pose down. Now, scoring for this round is based solely on first place votes. If you don't get a first place vote, you don't get a point. Now, once the pose down started, Viator and Dickerson were immediately placed next to each other so the judges could make their final comparisons. It was obvious by the score that the show was down to these two. Once the judges were finished, all of the competitors were filed off stage and waited for their final placings to be called out. All right, let's start with 11th place. And that went to Annabelle Lopez, who looked much improved from a month prior, but was unable to crack that top 10. 10th place, we had Ed Corney, who dropped down a few places from his previous outing in Miami. And unfortunately, his conditioning was off, but he still managed to amaze the crowd with his posing routine. 9th place went to Tom Platz, who looked like he was holding quite a bit of water to me. And in a few articles I had read, he had mistimed his peak. Okay, moving on to 8th place, and that went to Steve Mihalik, who showed up in equivalent shape as he did in Miami. Very good, but not as drawn out, but the lineup here was just a little bit too steep. Okay, on to 7th place, and that went to England's own Tony Emmett, who looked really good, especially for being one of those last-minute entrants I was talking about. Actually, Padilla was originally scheduled to compete in this show, but he opted out, so promoters had to scramble last minute, and they were able to book Emmett. All right, moving on to 6th place, which went to Carlos Rodriguez. And according to most of the articles, Rodriguez looked much harder than he did in Miami and definitely earned his place here. Okay, now on to the top 5. Coming in 5th place was Boyer Coe, who came into the show looking much more improved. But like I stated in my last video, this was definitely all a part of his game plan. He was working his way up to the Olympia, which was many months away. So I'm sure he was pleased with 5th place. Okay, now on to 4th place, and that went to Robbie Robinson. And this placing actually had the audience kind of divided because Robinson was a crowd favorite, but the judges felt that he was a bit smoother than usual. All right, moving on to 3rd place, and that went to energetic and excited Samir Bannout. And who could blame him? He just beat a legend. And I've got to agree with the judges here because Samir was in the best shape of his life up to this point, and he knew it. According to Bill Reynolds, the morning of the contest, Samir had ended up calling him 4 separate times so that he could stop by his room just to check on his conditioning. All right, coming in 2nd place, earning 2 first-place votes with a total score of 302 points, was Chris Dickerson. Now, according to what I read, Dickerson was kind of disappointed, and I can't blame him. But he was a professional and went out there with a smile and took his check for $3,000, which I'm sure wasn't hard. Okay, now moving on to 1st place. Before his name could even be called, Casey Viator was screaming backstage in joy, which I got a kick out of reading. Now, this would be Casey's first ever IFBB Pro win, earning him 16 points and a check for $6,000. And it's hard to argue that he didn't earn this one. From what I had read, he had dropped 7 pounds from the show in Miami, putting him around 207 pounds. But of course, I've got to say, of course, this was definitely a close battle between Viator and Dickerson. I really could have seen it go either way. Actually, heading into the final round, Casey was behind, but the final round had him earning those 5 first-place votes, which solidified his victory. After the show was over, Viator and his father were caught backstage counting the total points earned for the overall Grand Prix standings. At this point in the circuit, Dickerson and Viator were both tied for first place with a total of 29 points. Okay, so this concludes the Louisiana Grand Prix, leaving 2 more shows before the finals in New York City. But that's going to do it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And if you did, please don't forget to give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and if you want more classic bodybuilding content, check out my Instagram page @RetroMuscleMags.